Today, I am here with Patrick Doyle. Patrick Doyle is a good friend of mine. He's also an author, a thought leader, and has 30 years of experience of working with people in a therapeutic sense, whether it be counseling, coaching, helping them get more in line with their intrinsic value and believing that about themselves. So today, I'm super excited to have you here because I wanted to talk about just that, like value, intrinsic value, and how that plays out in the music industry with
Yeah.
artists,
Yes.
with producers, with wherever you want to go with that. But
Mhm.
I've seen it be a struggle over the years, like
Well,
with artists.
thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad you're doing this. I think this is a very important thing because I think many artists suffer greatly silently. And, we don't have to look very hard at how many creatives, beautiful people with great creative skill have killed themselves, uh, whether purposely or by default through overdose. I mean, you got Michael Jackson, Prince, you know, Jimi Hendrix. I mean, you just go down the line of these people who were groundbreaking. Their skill and their talent was, once in a lifetime, once in a generation, whatever you want to say. They're clearly talented outside of normal things.
Yeah.
So insecurity is, I think, one of the things that drives that. And when you're insecure but you're famous, you're in a real bind
Mm.
because you can't ever get any internal peace. And this is the thing that I think is a double-edged sword. On one side, the angst of all that unrest is the source of a lot of beautiful creation.
Mm.
On the other side, it's also the motor or the engine that drives the self-destructive behavior.
Mm.
So, in my experience, what I have seen is all self-destructive behavior, no matter what form it comes in, whether it's drugs, alcohol, the gym, religion, money, work, sex, drugs, whatever. All that compulsive behavior, that self destructive, compulsive behavior, is the result of a lack of peace.
Mm.
Okay. And that lack of peace is undergirded by a belief that you're inadequate or not good enough.
Mm.
And that belief can be so deeply embedded in us that we aren't even conscious of it.
Mm.
But if I said, hey, Amber, take a bat and hit me in the head as hard as you can, you're like, all right, crazy man. And then afterwards, I'm like, ow, ow, man, that really hurt. Hey, could you do that again?
Mm.
You'd be like, what is wrong with you? Well, that in its essence, what self-destructive behavior is. We're harming ourselves and feeling great about it. But the
Mm.
truth is, the reason why that self-destruction makes sense, and this is why people who have everything that are self-destructive, people just like scratch their heads like they have everything
Mhm.
except for the one thing they need, which is peace.
Mhm.
And so what happens is I believe I'm inadequate, but everybody around me thinks I'm wonderful.
Mm.
And no matter how many people applaud you and say you're the greatest thing ever, it does not fix that value structure. In
Mhm.
fact, it pours gas on it because the person then internalizes and says, well, that's not helping me feel peace because all these people's accolades isn't making me feel better. It's making me feel worse. It actually heightens it because they see themselves as inadequate because they can't even let in the thing that the people are saying to them.
Mm. Like
So these,
compliments and stuff, you mean?
huh?
You mean like compliments and things like
Oh
that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
They can't even let it in.
yeah, you have a number one record, you're super successful. But here's the thing I see all the time with very successful people. As soon as they get to the top, they're the worst they've ever been
Mm.
because they climb that hill and the hope that it's going to change them is now forever vanquished. And now they're just sitting in the hopelessness of nothing out here is going to fix me and I'm not at peace in here.
Mm.
So that belief that I'm inadequate is very subconscious. But every time I see somebody being regularly self destructive, I know they have it.
Mm.
And it comes from many things. I was an abused kid. That's where it came from for me. So I often talk about people who have believe they are not good enough, they're less than, they're not worth the skin they're printed in, whatever. In counseling terms, we call that toxic shame.
Mm-hmm.
So toxic shame is always the result of misplaced blame.
Mm.
So I'm a kid. My dad's an alcoholic, abusive, two-war veteran, PTSD, and he's beating me. But as a kid, what do I think's going on? I
Mm-hmm.
think there's something wrong with me. I need to be stronger. I need to be less sensitive. I need to be more like my dad. I need to be more obedient. Blah, 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 blah. But the truth is, it didn't matter who was in my dad's way. He was going to abuse him because he was in two wars. He had PTSD. He was an alcoholic. The man was seriously messed up. God bless him.
Mm-hmm.
But that message was deeply sent to me that I'm inadequate, that I'm a problem. And it doesn't matter what all the external realities are, that was given to me in a deep way. So toxic shame is always the result of misplaced blame. So my dad misplaced the blame from him to me, and I took it in. I didn't have any defense against it.
Mm-hmm.
So the healing of toxic shame is to appropriately assign the blame. So my healing from my dad's harm and the value message that he gave me came when I appropriately assigned the blame to where it went.
Yeah.
And I understood that where he came from and what he went through and why those things happened to him. My dad didn't want to be that way, I don't think, but you go through all that hardship and that horror, it does something to you. And my dad never worked on it. Obviously, he just drank. So as someone who's been harmed and has that message, every one of us who has that I don't matter message, the toxic shame, also has what I call a shitty committee. It's a committee in your head, and they get together, have committee meetings, and their committee meetings are all talking shit about you. They're blaming you, and you hear a lot of finger wagging in those meetings. And one of the things I tell people all the time is that you have to find out who the chairman of your committee is. Now, in my case, clearly my dad. My dad is by far the chairman of the committee, but he had other committee members. My mom, who also died of alcoholism when I was 10.
Mm-hmm.
What did that tell me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my mom doesn't care about me. I mean, I didn't know that consciously, but my soul did. Like, my mom never was even a part of my life, really. She was just always in a chair drunk.
Yeah.
So then you have other people. I was in the military. I had girlfriends. Things happen, and all those things start to stack up. But when you have a toxic shame mindset, you become responsibility Velcro. Stuff sticks to you that shouldn't be sticking to you, and everybody else has what I call responsibility Teflon. Nothing sticks to them. It's all your fault. And so there's all these mental gymnastics going on. And here's the problem I see it with creatives a lot. Their creativity is part of the battle with that shame. So there's a beauty about it. Like one artist I can think of right off the top of my head that recently I see has turned that toxic shame into great art, and that's NF. That guy has taken the deep pain that he has experienced, and he's made beautiful music about it. Deeply moving, well crafted.
Yeah.
Just going for it. I don't know if it's brought him peace, but it's definitely in the better direction than avoidance. And this is the other thing I will tell people is that, look, my favorite quote, the avoidance of pain is the beginning of all unhealthy behavior. And how many musician stories have we heard about how their lives were destroyed by them using so much of something to avoid the pain instead of dealing with it? And
well,
so
they layer in money, and it's like they have endless possibilities and options, right? It just kind of goes up a notch in that way. So the accessibility is like everywhere.
So you can kill yourself faster.
Oh my gosh. Well, and it does happen a lot.
Yes. And so, I've never met someone who had the shame message that was not harmed. So this is the ultimate thing. And listen, I don't care what the harm is. Everyone's perception of that is what matters. So there's no comparison. Like if I say, well, people say to me all the time when they hear my story, well, wow, your story is so much harder than mine. I'm like, no, it's not. My story is my story and your story is your story. If it feels horrible to you, that's all that matters. Mine feels horrible to me. Yours feels. Let's not compare. Comparison always leaves us in a bad place. I never win when I compare. When I compare, I always end up on the wrong side of that. I'm the loser. So comparison kills. No comparison. If it's painful to you, if it hurt you, that's all that matters. And see, this is how we get into dealing with it and appropriately assigning the responsibility and beginning to allow ourselves to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And as a musician, I strongly believe that most musicians that I have known and been close to are very sensitive souls. And I say that as a compliment.
Yeah.
They have a sensitivity to what's around them. They have a sensitivity to meaning. They're sensitive. But we don't live in a sensitive, friendly world. If you're a dude who's very sensitive and a musician,
Mm-hmm.
there's not a lot of place for you to stand.
Mm.
Right? So, girl that's sensitive, okay, that we have culturally, we like, okay. If you're a gay man and sensitive, well, that's okay, but we just, that being who you are is the most important thing here. Is the more you value yourself, the more authentic you'll be.
Mm.
And so this is what I see drive famous people, and I've met many and worked with many famous people crazy, is that they lose their ability to have any anonymity.
Yeah.
They don't have any peace inside, and nothing they do brings any relief. So
Mm-hmm.
they're in this constant chase
Mm-hmm.
rather than stopping and dealing with that and becoming their authentic self, and to hell with the public opinion, or becoming your authentic self within a space that you carve out that is safe,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're the public image person.
Mm-hmm.
But if you try to be both, you're going to be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot be the public image and the real you, because the public image is never the real you. It's just a small piece. Your
Yeah.
music is only a piece of you. It's not all of you.
Gosh, that's so true. But it's like, what's that song? Dance Monkey Dance,
Yeah.
right? Like,
They put their quarter in, they want their dance, by golly.
yeah, come on, do your dance. That's who you are. That's who we want you to be.
Yeah.
And, I've
Yeah.
seen that happen too with young artists that have grown up in the industry. And the other thing I was going to mention is like, yeah, it's important to deal with that stuff, but a lot of times, these young artists, they don't have a whole lot of like emotional support around them.
For
It is
sure.
that monkey dance, need you to do this, need you to do that. And so then
Well,
they're grown up taught that that's who I am and that's my value. And
yeah,
that's messes with your mind.
it's dangerous, because if my value is external, then I'm on a very dangerous roller coaster, because if someone from the outside decides not to like me, now I'm no good.
Yeah.
So I'm riding the role of public opinion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And listen, we all know people are fickle.
Yeah.
They love you one minute, and then you put out a bad album, and then they're tearing you apart online because
Yes.
you sold out, or because whatever. It's
Yes.
like, you sit down and write an album, dude.
Yeah. Why
Like,
don't you bare your soul to the whole
exactly.
world?
And that's
Like,
something that I know from you, from our conversations, is that a lot of the writing that you have done and the songs that you have come to have come out of the process of you dealing with the pain within you,
true. Yeah. It's
which is
very
very different than
therapeutic.
trying to write a hit song.
Yeah. No.
I mean, I think you have written several hit songs. Well, we'll see, but the reality is that that's how some people do it. They go from pain to page,
Mm-hmm.
and other
Mm.
people are going from mind to page. They're making ideas. They're rhyming lyrics. It's not very connected.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm.
one of the things that I spent years as a pastor and in the church, and one of the things that started happening to me was I could not stand, and even to this day, it's hard for me,
I know where you're
worship music.
going. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that was pointed out to me, that it just like unlocked it for me. I was like, oh, that's it. Is that I love music. Music saved my life more than once. It's an integral part of who I am. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
I've been involved in the music business. I was a concert promoter. I was a booking agent way back in the day. Love music. Um, and somebody said that, pointed out to me, like, well, the problem with worship music is it's all imitation.
Mm,
It's not inspiration.
wow.
And so and I think that principle is true in large.
Mm,
Like, music that's imitation can sell well, because, look at
right.
pop, look at rap. Everybody's imitating each other. But
Mm,
bleh, that's not really what I'm interested in. I want something that's born of inspiration. And that inspiration doesn't happen because I work at it
mhm,
only. You have
mhm,
to provide some space for the inspiration to come. But inspiration is something you can't really control,
mhm,
but you have to be present for, right? And so presence is stolen by shame.
mm.
So I think it really impacts the inspiration level when you
Yeah.
have all that fear and that shame internally. Um, and so
Mm,
helping people move to a greater level of inspiration. And again, one of the problems when we talk about these things is people talk about them in extreme terms, inspiration versus no inspiration. Look, it's a continuum. I have 5% inspiration today and maybe I have 25% tomorrow, but 100 and 0 probably aren't even realistic.
yeah.
So it ebbs and flows, like where things are at. And the other thing that I see all the time with musicians is I do it myself, as an author and a thought leader. I have thoughts and ideas that I see from observation and years of experience. And
Yeah.
if I don't capture them, they're gone.
Yes.
The
It's so
moments of
true.
inspiration that you see something and the dots connect and you're like, oh, I'll
Mhm.
remember that. No, you won't.
No.
Remember, I don't know if this will come back and haunt me, but one time when I was a very young teenager, I was doing acid, and me and my buddies, and I was sure that I had figured out the world's problems. I, I
In
had this,
vivid colors.
yes, in vivid colors, and I wrote it all down. I was writing it all down. And, a couple of days later, we come to, and I found this paper while I was writing on it. It didn't make a damn bit of sense. It was just in my deluded state. I was sure I'd solved the world's problems, and we were all jumping around. We're going to change the world.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
have changed the world in a different sort of way, but it wasn't
Yeah,
because I solved the world's problems. But um,
absolutely.
that inspiration, comes in times when you don't know it's going to hit. So being prepared, and one of my mentors used to tell me, always, this was back before cell phones, always keep a piece of paper with you, keep a little notepad,
Right.
always keep, because it's going to hit you when you're
Yeah.
standing in line at the grocery store. Jot it
Or
down.
in a restaurant. I mean, how
Oh
many
yeah,
artists are like, I wrote it on the napkin, in a
exactly.
restaurant
Well, and
before cell
sometimes
phones,
it's
of
in the
course.
midst of a great conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
Boom, it hits, and you're like, oh yeah. So yeah, being able to capture it is also very important. But having shame makes us shy away from taking the risk.
Yeah, well, you're also spinning like internally. Your mind is just always like thinking about stuff and
Yes,
questioning and wondering if I did
so
that right
true.
or not, and fighting the lies of like, why'd you do that? You're so stupid. And that's so
Yeah,
like, yeah, why people are gonna hate that. You just have to fight all these like conversations. And so there's really no room for that open space for inspirations to drop in
so
and
true.
then have the energy to document it and put it down, right? You're so tired from all that
Right.
chatter in the mind. The other thing, I love what you said in regards to imitation and inspiration is imitation's easy.
It's a formula.
Inspiration is vulnerable.
Yes. And that's what shame takes away.
Yeah.
Shame, this is something I say all the time, shame steals boldness. It kills it. So it's important that we work it out. So again, we're talking about percentages, right? It's not either or. We want
Yeah.
to increase the amount of boldness that we have and decrease the amount of shame we have, so that then when you do have the inspiration and then you hear the melody, you have the courage to write it down, to
Mhm.
document it, so that, like, oh, that was good. And I've talked to many, many very successful people that they're afraid of success.
Mhm.
And it shows up in odd ways, like risks that they ought to be taking, they don't,
Right.
because they know it'll work.
How do you know about that?
Yeah, I don't know because I've never done that before. Um, so yeah, it's really it's very a very internal thing.
Yeah.
And I think that people need at least one or two very safe people to say anything to that won't get to the tabloids, that won't get to the
Yeah.
media, that won't get to Twitter, whatever. That it's locked down, it's ironclad. That they have the safety to say whatever. And so I learned this in the church world too. Is as a leader in the church world, you cannot be honest. You can't say what's going on. I mean, the most
Especially if you're a
recent,
worship leader or
yes, exactly, musician,
leader.
yeah.
Yeah.
Most recent example of that is Ravi Zacharias, very famous theologian, speaker, but he was twisted. But who's he going to tell?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of delusion too when you're up there on stage thinking you're being authentic and real, but really, by raising your hands and by worshiping and
Mhm.
maybe you really are feeling that, but the lack there is the authenticity. You're kind
Well,
of programmed, you're trained to act a certain way and perform
well, there's
in the name
there
of worship.
there are tons of psychological cues that are unavoidable in a worship service. They're psychological cues more than they are a spontaneous movement
Yeah.
because it repeats itself. That's why it's not spontaneous.
Hmm.
And I've been to churches where, the same woman on the same song at the same point stands up every time, right?
Yeah.
That's not inspiration, that's training.
Yeah, and to a certain point, that also happens outside the church when you're performing on stage. I mean, there's an element of that
Yeah,
manipulation, you could
yeah,
say,
absolutely.
or
That's what
crafting to
concert
get people excited. I think.
that's what concerts are. It's a fine
Yeah,
dance between manipulation and inspiration.
yeah. But I mean, I think when I go to like a concert, there's an expectation of like, okay, they're up there performing. But when it's labeled worship, that's where I get a little like, like isn't
A
that an
worship
oxymoron? Like,
concert?
yeah, like we're worshiping the performers or the performance, or I don't know. I mean, it's different for everyone, but
Yeah.
there's a
It's very convoluted in that way.
absolutely. Well, cool. Thank you so much for just your thoughts on all that and
Yeah.
your perspective, not only as a huge fan of music, but just on a therapeutic, psychological perspective
Yeah.
with
And
and personal experience.
yeah, and
Appreciate
I hope that maybe what you're doing will help bring some light to musicians and their emotional health. And
it.
that's something I'm working on regularly is working with people that have big levels of influence
Yeah.
to help them help others. Uh,
Yeah.
because that's how it happens in the musical world. You have to have somebody with status that says this is what a good thing, and then everybody's like, okay.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
it's good. I'm glad you're doing it.
Cool. Thank you again.
You're welcome.